The morning was calm. The sun was shining. Birds were flying. People walked to work, checked their phones, and drank their coffee like any normal day. No one knew that the world was about to change forever. Jace Carter stood outside the train station in the middle of the city, waiting for his ride. He looked up at the sky, just like he always did, but something felt strange. The clouds weren't moving. The air was heavy, like the world had stopped breathing. Then, a low humming sound began. At first, it was soft like wind passing through metal, but it got louder. People around him paused. A baby started crying. Dogs began barking in all directions. Jace looked up again and saw something he could not understand. A massive shadow moved across the sky, covering the sun completely. At first, it looked like a dark cloud, but it was too perfect, too round. Then came another, then another. Soon, dozens of round black shapes filled the sky, huge objects, silent and smooth, blocking the light. People began pointing. Cars stopped in the streets. News alerts hit phones, but no one could explain what was happening. The shapes didn't move fast or slow. They just floated above the earth. Watching, Jace's phone buzzed. A breaking news notification appeared. Unidentified objects detected in global orbit. Authorities advised staying indoors. But it was too late. All around the world the same thing was happening. In London, in Tokyo, in Rio, these ships had arrived at the same time. Quiet, cold, without a single message or signal. Back in the city, the humming turned into a vibration. The ground began to shake, slightly not like an earthquake, but like something far, far above was pulling on the earth. Jace saw a woman drop her coffee. A man grabbed his child and ran for the building. Panic was rising. Then, the power went out. Streetlights, traffic signals, every screen, all dead. For a few seconds, the city stood in complete silence. No machines, no phones, no engines, just the sound of wind and confused breathing. Jace heard a whisper, not from a person, but from his own smartwatch. A voice, broken and robotic, whispered, "They have arrived." Suddenly, a deep tone echoed across the sky, like a bell made of thunder. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The ships above turned slightly, just enough for their sides to glow. Then something even stranger happened. Dozens of glowing lines appeared between the ships and the sky. These lines connected them like spiderwebs made of light. The sky itself looked like it was being covered in a net. A small girl near Jace cried out, "Is this a dream?" No one answered her. In the control room deep under Mount Lawson, far from the city, a team of scientists watched the screens in disbelief. Orbit scans showed hundreds of ships, perfect in formation, unmoving, not responding to any signal from Earth. No sound, no message, no sign of life. Dr. Lin, one of the satellite analysts, leaned closer to her screen. Her voice was shaking. "They're not here to talk." Jace stood frozen. The air was growing colder, even though it was midday. The sun was completely gone now. Only the soft glow of the ships gave any light. And then, the sky changed again. A long crack of light opened across the largest ship, like a curtain being pulled back. Inside, no one could see anything clearly, just a soft blue glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. All at once, the humming stopped. Silence. The birds had vanished. The city was completely still. It was like the whole planet was holding its breath. People waited, for words, for sound, for anything. But nothing came. Not a single voice, not a single demand. The ships did not move. They simply hovered, watching, as if waiting for Earth to make the first mistake. Jace looked around. People had begun moving slowly, heading for shelter, pulling their children close. Some prayed. Others just stared upward, unable to look away. In that moment, Jace felt something deep inside him, a feeling he had never felt before. Not fear, not anger, but a quiet question. Why are they so quiet? The first 20 minutes passed like this. No attack, no announcement, just chaos in the minds of people. But what no one knew was that the silence from the sky was not peace, it was calculation, and soon it would be Earth's turn to answer. The silence after the ships arrived was louder than any sound. The sky was still, full of dark shapes, unmoving and quiet, as if time had paused, but the fear had not. People stayed inside. Streets were empty. Radios played static. The world waited for something to happen. Jace sat on the floor of a small shop with the door locked behind him. A few others were there, mother and her son, a delivery man, and the shop owner. None of them spoke much. They kept looking outside through the windows. The floating ships were still visible through the clouds, like heavy stones hanging in the sky. In many places around the world, the scene was the same. Some people stayed in basements. Others stayed in cars or parking garages. But no one felt safe. Not really. The strangest part was that nothing more happened. 20 minutes had passed since the first appearance. And then, nothing. No beams of light. No machines on the ground. No messages. People started asking questions. Were they waiting? Were they watching? Was this the end? But far away, in a cold mountain base hidden deep beneath the surface, answers were starting to appear. A military science team, one of the last working command units on Earth, had managed to get part of their system back online using backup power. They were listening, scanning, searching for any sign from the ship's dot, and finally, they heard something. It was a soft sound, barely above a whisper. A signal, not human, not strong, but there. The signal came from one of the ships. It didn't speak in any language. It didn't seem like a message meant for Earth. It sounded like CONFUSION. Dr. Ilara Hennings, a calm but focused communications expert, stared at the repeating sound on her screen. "They're talking," she whispered, "but not to us." Everyone in the room turned to her. She replayed the signal through a translator. The words were broken, but a few lines came through. Unexpected, resistance, delay, recalculating. The room fell quiet. The alien ships hadn't stayed still because they had finished something. They had paused because something had surprised them. Back in the city, Chase stepped outside for a moment. The air was cool and still. He could hear nothing, no cars, no birds, not even the wind. It was peaceful, but not in a comforting way. It felt more like the silence before a storm. He looked up. The largest ship above the city turned slightly. It didn't move closer. It didn't light up. But the slight turn made his heart race. Were they watching him? Watching the city? Watching all of Earth? And if they were watching, what were they waiting for? News stations began to come back online, slowly. Emergency systems were being restored in small parts of the globe. Old communication satellites still in orbit were picking up pieces of information. From Australia to Canada to Africa, people were asking the same thing. Why are they waiting? In one underground data center, an engineer named Marcus discovered something strange. The alien ships weren't just sitting in space, they were scanning. Not cities, not weapons, they were scanning people. Health records, brain activity, energy levels. It wasn't war they were looking for, it was reaction. Marcus leaned back in his chair, stunned. They were expecting something, he said softly. They wanted to see what we'd do. But humanity hadn't done what the invaders expected. Earth didn't launch counterattacks. Earth didn't burn. Earth had frozen, waited, observed, and that made the aliens pause. In another part of the world, an astronaut floating on a small orbiting research station managed to pick up a direct signal. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, but it was the first time one of the ships sent a message without blocking it. He heard the words in a quiet, frightened voice. "They're not falling. Why aren't they falling?" The astronaut recorded the signal and sent it down to Earth. Back in the city, Jace heard the news from a nearby emergency broadcast speaker. The message repeated every few minutes, and each time the same thought repeated in his mind. If they expected us to collapse in fear, and we didn't, what are they going to do now? The sky remained still. The ships didn't move. But something had changed. The Watchers were no longer in control. They were waiting for orders. But Earth was no longer just waiting. It was beginning to listen. And soon, it would begin to respond. Deep beneath the snow-covered lands of Antarctica, where the sun barely touched the ice and the winds never rested, a long-forgotten system came back to life. It was buried so deep that even the birds didn't fly above it, hidden from satellites, maps, and even most of Earth's leaders. It had no name on paper anymore, just a silent signal that began blinking after nearly 30 years of sleep. The base had been built during a time of great fear, when humans worried about each other more than anything from the stars. But someone, decades ago, had planned for more than human conflict. They had dreamed bigger and darker. Inside that base, connected to old cables and dusty panels, lived a system called Sentinel-0. It was not a weapon. It was not a soldier. It was something else. It was a listener, and now, it was awake. In the small control room of the base, red lights flickered gently. Dust floated through the air. The hum of ancient machines slowly turned into rhythm. A screen, quiet for decades, lit up with soft green code. The system had received a signal, the same strange pulse the world's top scientists had recorded earlier, but unlike them, Sentinel-0 didn't just hear it. It understood part of it. It read confusion, and it read fear, but not human fear, alien fear. The system began to process faster. It compared star charts. It reviewed Earth's defense networks. It scanned old patterns, old blueprints, old plans that had been buried with time. And it watched the skies dot above. The world still looked the same. The ships still hung quietly. People still waited. And the silence stretched longer than anyone could bear. Jace, now in a small rooftop shelter, with a working radio, stared at the sky with tired eyes. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. But he couldn't stop looking up. He didn't know why. But something inside him said this wasn't over. Somewhere across the world, in the underground command center in Geneva, a signal appeared on one of their screens. It wasn't from any known satellite or station. It was old, routed through hidden channels, a long-forgotten signal code. A technician looked up. "Sir, we're receiving something from the old Antarctic line." The commander narrowed his eyes. That base was shut down. Who's sending it? The technician shook his head. "It's not a person." The signal read only one line: Sentinel-0 online, standing by. Inside the Antarctic base, Sentinel-0 had begun scanning the alien ships in detail. It read their formations, their energy levels, their timing, their patterns of silence, and it found something unusual. The alien ships were not designed for long-term battle. Their energy signatures were too soft. Their weapons systems, what little the Sentinel could read, seemed like they hadn't been fully charged. Some ships were not even active. They were just there. Sentinel came to a strange conclusion. The attack wasn't real. It was a simulation, a test. But a test of what? The system opened an old directory, one full of files marked classified, and human response protocol. One file, called Phase 0 Invasion Simulation, matched the current events almost perfectly. The simulation had predicted panic, system failure, global confusion, followed by surrender. But Earth hadn't followed the pattern. Instead, Earth had gone quiet. It had hidden. It had observed. It had paused. And that pause had created something new. Curiosity. Back in the city, Jace finally heard something new on the radio. A voice. A real voice. Not a recording. Not a warning. A live transmission. "This is Earth Command. To all listening stations. To all surviving units. We are not alone in this. We are not powerless. We are listening. Stay calm. Stay ready." He couldn't believe it. Someone was talking again. But more than that, someone was doing something far below the ice. Sentinel-0 made a decision. It opened a file labeled Project Lightwave and sent a small signal into the sky. Not a weapon, not a warning, just a pulse of information, a response. It reached one of the alien ships, the closest one. For a moment, the ship flickered. Its lights dimmed, then flashed once. Something inside it shifted. In a quiet chamber aboard that ship, an alien stood before a glowing screen, watching the pulse repeat. Its eyes widened. Its translator struggled to decode the message, but one part was clear. "Human observation complete. Your test failed." The alien stepped back, unsure. Earth had responded, but not with fire, with understanding. And that understanding carried something far more dangerous. It carried intention on the ground. Jace watched the ship above him blink once. It was small, almost invisible, but it was the first thing that had changed in hours. He didn't know why, but he smiled just a little. Somewhere, somehow, someone on Earth was no longer just watching. They were answering, and whatever happened next, it would not be silence. Asterisk high above the Earth, where the stars quietly blinked beyond the black curve of space, one alien ship stirred. Its lights, which had remained cold and unchanging for hours, flickered for just a moment. No one on the ground noticed. No human radar marked the change. But deep inside the ship, something had shifted. The pulse from Earth, quiet, and filled with strange data, had reached it. This wasn't a normal signal. It didn't carry sound or demand. It wasn't loud. It didn't ask for anything. But it carried meaning. The ship's inner systems tried to process the strange pattern. Its processors had never seen this kind of logic before. The codes weren't in any known alien language. They weren't designed to talk. They were designed to observe. The signal held a rhythm, almost like breathing. A calm but steady message. It said only one thing: "We see you." The alien commander aboard the ship stepped forward, studying the shapes of the signal wave on the screen. Their fingers moved slowly over the controls. This world, Earth, was supposed to be quiet, slow, primitive, not dangerous, but now, it was listening. It had responded. Back on Earth, in the depths of the Antarctic base, Sentinel-0 continued its silent work. It didn't speak to humans, it didn't send orders, but its network had begun to grow. Across mountains and seas, it reached into old systems, satellites, communication towers, deep-sea sensors. Each one came alive, blinking softly, waking after long sleep. Earth had been building things in secret, not to fight, not to attack, but to watch the skies. Now, those eyes were opening all at once. In the Pacific Ocean, a floating research station received a strange echo through the waves, an underwater signal coming not from the sea, but bouncing through it from above. The researcher, a young woman named Mara, sat alone on the deck, headphones on. She heard the pattern. It was slow, patient, like a heartbeat. It didn't say anything directly, but it didn't need to. The ocean had joined the sky, Jace still on the rooftop, watched as one of the ships above finally moved, just a little, turning its edge ever so slightly. To most people, it would seem like nothing, but Jace had been watching it for hours, and this was the first time it reacted. He reached for his radio. "It moved," he said softly. "One of them just moved." The reply came from a distant command post. "We know." In the control center beneath Geneva, a quiet room full of tired eyes stared at screens, now lighting up with patterns, echoes of Sentinel-0's signal. Every hour, the pulse was growing stronger. One of the generals leaned closer to the table map. "We didn't respond with fear," he said slowly, "and now, they don't know what to do." Earth wasn't firing. Earth wasn't shouting. Earth was simply watching, and in doing so, Earth had changed the rules. High above, aboard the alien ship, another screen lit up, a diagram of Earth, but this time, the markings were different. Not military, not energy, not threat. Curiosity. The commander on the alien ship tilted their head. The decision to approach Earth had been made long ago, by voices far beyond this galaxy. They had studied Earth from afar. They had seen the wars, the division, the noise. They had seen fear, and they expected it to fall quickly. But now, they saw quiet. Not silence from fear, but silence from calculation. The ships were still waiting for orders, but even the higher command, watching from distant stars, was uncertain, because Earth had not reacted the way others had. Earth had paused, and in that pause, it had revealed something rare. Restraint. Back in Antarctica, Sentinel-0 continued scanning. It wasn't looking for weakness. It wasn't preparing an attack. It was observing behavior. It had seen something no one else had noticed. Small patterns of change inside the alien network. Their energy was being shifted. Their command systems were updating in real time, but slowly, uncertainly, as if they were not sure what to do next. So Sentinel-0 sent another signal. This one was even simpler. Just 3 words, repeated in code. "You are seen." This signal echoed across oceans and into the sky, reaching not just one ship, but all of them. It wasn't a threat, it was a reminder. Earth was not asleep. Earth was not blind. From his rooftop, Jace looked up at the sky again. The ships still hung there, quiet as ever, but now, they didn't look like hunters. They looked like guests who had knocked on the wrong door, and Earth had answered without fear. Just silence and eyes wide open. The clouds had returned, soft and grey, moving slowly across the sky, but they could not hide what was still above those great silent ships, cold and unmoving, watching the Earth below. Hours had passed since their arrival. Nothing had fallen. Nothing had landed. And yet, everyone knew something had changed. On every screen, in every city that still had power, maps glowed with blinking lights. Each light showed a ship, hundreds of them, hanging over oceans, deserts, forests, and mountains. Their shapes had not changed. Their silence had not broken. But something was different now. In one of the few remaining science centers still online, an elderly engineer named Ravi stood in front of a large screen, his fingers shaking as he zoomed in on a new pattern. The ships weren't just sitting anymore. They were slowly, carefully adjusting their positions, not to surround the planet, but to avoid certain areas. "They're shifting," he whispered to his assistant. not to move in, to move around. His assistant blinked, avoiding something. Ravi nodded, avoiding us. Far beneath the ground, in the deep tunnels of a forgotten human facility, known only as Ark of 7. Another signal was received, this time from one of the ships directly. It was not strong, it was not clear, but it had emotion in it, confusion, worry. In the silent room, the message was played again and again. Most of it made no sense, but one part was slowly decoded. We were told Earth was quiet. We were told Earth would break. We were not told Earth could listen. The scientists there sat quietly. Some felt uneasy, others felt proud. None of them knew what would happen next, but one thing was clear. The ships were no longer acting like invaders. They were acting like explorers who had gone too far. Back in the city, Jace wandered the quiet streets. He was not the only one. Others had come out, 2 people with tired eyes, looking up without panic. The fear had not gone completely, but it had changed. It had become something slower, something like patience, and maybe something like trust. A child stood near a fountain, pointing at the sky. "Are they still watching us?" An old woman beside him smiled gently. "Maybe, but we're watching them too." Jace found himself thinking about that. The power had returned in some areas. Lights flickered back on. The air was still heavy, but not frozen anymore. He walked past a small cafe where people sat inside, listening to a quiet radio broadcast. A calm voice was speaking. Reports continued to show no movement from the ships. "Global systems are being restored. Stay aware, stay safe. We are not alone, but we are not silent." In the mountains of Eastern Europe, a small observatory caught something strange. One of the ships had changed shape. Its smooth body had gently unfolded into a new form, not sharp, not threatening, just open, like a flower reacting to light. The scientists there watched in wonder. One of them whispered, "It's learning." The ships were not reacting with force. They were reacting with curiosity. Deep under the Pacific, Sentinel-0 continued its silent work. But now, it was no longer just watching the aliens. It was watching humanity. It was recording how people behaved, how they reacted, how they recovered. Every act of kindness, every calm voice, every moment of strength. It stored all of it, because this, too, was part of Earth's response. And the ships above had begun to notice. In a dark control room on one of the alien ships, a young officer stood quietly beside her commander. She had never visited another world before. This had been her first mission. She had been told Earth would fall quickly, that humans would panic, run, hide, surrender, but none of that had happened. She stared at the monitor, watching a group of humans share food near a small fire, outside a quiet shelter. "They help each other," she said softly. Even now the commander nodded. "Yes, and they do not speak to us. They speak to each other." Another officer nearby whispered, "Should we leave?" The commander didn't answer, because the question was bigger than that now. Back on Earth, Jace returned to his rooftop. He sat down slowly and looked at the stars again. The ships were still there, but somehow, they didn't seem so distant anymore. He wondered if they were just as unsure as the people below. He wondered if they had expected a different world, and maybe they were now realizing that Earth was not what they had been told. Not silent, not simple, but watching, learning, waiting, and perhaps more ready than anyone believed. The streets were too quiet now. After the strange light disappeared from the sky, people had gone into hiding. Windows were shut, doors locked, and not even the usual sounds of the city remained. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Some stayed in basements, others in empty subway tunnels, waiting. No one knew what the silence meant, but silence that thick it didn't feel safe. It felt like something was watching. A boy named Kian stood behind a broken window inside an old bookstore. He had found the place by accident, while running from the flashes above. Books still lined the shelves, untouched and covered in dust. He wasn't a reader, but the stillness here felt better than the outside. Across the street, an elderly man slowly peeked out from behind his curtain. His hands shook not from age, but from fear. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing like this. They came so fast, he whispered to himself, and now, nothing. Just then, the radio, that hadn't worked for hours, suddenly gave a faint crackle. Keon turned towards it, staring. It wasn't loud, just a soft sound, like someone breathing through the airwaves. He stepped closer, unsure if it was real. Then the voice came. "Is anyone still out there?" Keon froze. The voice was tired, almost broken, but it was human, real, and it was speaking live. He grabbed the radio mic and pressed the button. "I hear you," he replied. There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again. "Stay quiet. They're still above us, but they're not moving. It's like they're listening." Keon didn't know who the speaker was, but the message was clear. Something strange was happening. The ships hadn't left, they just stopped, floating in the air like they were waiting for something. Not attacking, not speaking, just watching. Then in the basement of a hospital across the city, a young nurse comforted a group of patients hiding in the dark. She had no tools left, and the power was gone. All she had were her hands and calm voice, but her eyes kept moving to the ceiling. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was pressure, and it was growing. In an underground science lab, far from the city, a woman in a white coat stared at a monitor. She had been tracking the shapes above Earth. Their energy had dropped suddenly. No activity, no communication, just stillness. The data made no sense. "Maybe," she whispered to herself, "they're not looking at us anymore. Maybe they're listening to something bigger." Outside, the sky remained the same, open, quiet, strange. The clouds around the ships hadn't moved, like time had slowed in that one part of the sky. A few people stepped outside now, slowly and carefully, looking up, whispering questions no one could answer. Some even began to think the invasion was a test, not of Earth's weapons, but of its heart, how it responded, how people treated each other in the dark. Then came a new light, not from the sky, but from the ground, a pulse, gentle and soft, coming from a desert where no one lived. Satellites picked it up. People noticed it on their phones and radios. A low hum that didn't hurt, didn't scare, but reached everyone at once. In the bookstore, Keon felt it in his chest, like a memory he never had, waking up. In the hospital, the nurse looked at the ceiling and felt calm. In the lab, the scientist leaned back and stopped typing. "This isn't human," she said softly, "but it's not from them either." The silence was changing. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something new, still unknown, still unexplained, but warmer. For the first time, the world didn't feel afraid. It felt watched. Yes, but maybe not by something cruel. Maybe the ships were just waiting to